Hi, it's Doug. You ever seen a lemonade stand before? When a kid wants to make some money, it's the obvious thing to do. A hot summer day, something cold and refreshing that people want to buy. A lemonade stand is a great idea. But you get to thinking about it. You know, what's colder and even more popular than lemonade? Ice cream. That's the ticket. Make ice cream. You're going to get people lining down the block to buy it. It'll be great. Okay, so you got to offer at least two flavors, right? Chocolate and vanilla. So you head to the grocery store to buy the ingredients. Now for the chocolate flavoring, you know that you can buy chocolate syrup. It comes in a big bottle and it's not too expensive, so that's done. For the vanilla flavoring though, you're not so sure. What do you use to make something taste vanilla flavored? Well, you ask around and someone explains that vanilla flavoring comes from vanilla beans. That's the seed pod from a vanilla plant. And holy smokes, each vanilla seed pod costs $6 just for one bean. That can't be right. You ask a grocery store attendant, excuse me, sir, is this the correct price on here? Yep, $6. That's what you'll need for vanilla flavoring, he explains. You get the flavoring by squeezing the bean and the seeds that are inside. You'll need at least 5 or 6 beans. Ugh. That's going to get expensive. But wait a minute, you have an idea. Could you plant a vanilla bean and just grow more vanilla beans? You ask the store attendant and he says, well, it would take a while, but yeah, you could do that. When you plant a vanilla bean, it'll grow into a vanilla plant. At first, the plant will have beautiful flowers growing on it. But after several weeks, some of the flowers will shrivel up. And vanilla beans will grow right at the base of where those flowers were. Whoa, you think. Hey, forget about selling vanilla ice cream. At $6 per bean, you could be making way more money selling vanilla beans themselves. And this actually might be a simple thing to do. Just plant some vanilla seeds in a garden and then collect their seed pods once they've grown. This is genius. You think to yourself, psh, lemonade stands are for babies. Now, to grow vanilla seed pods, you're going to want to grow a lot of them, as many as possible. And for that, you're going to need to find some space to grow them. So you ask around, and it turns out that in nearly every community, this is true, there's a community garden where members of the community can plant and grow things. Now, as luck would have it, there's extra space in the community greenhouse. So you get to work planting your vanilla seeds in there. They soon sprout and grow up into vanilla plants, which look like this. All right, soon you're going to have vanilla beans. Cha-ching! That's going to be a lot of money. Your vanilla plants grow these pretty flowers, but they're not growing any seed pods. What's going on? Finally, you decide, well, I should look for pictures and videos of vanilla plants that do grow beans to see if there's something I'm doing wrong. When you look more closely at videos of vanilla plants, that's when you notice this. All these bees were hanging around, landing on each flower, buzzing around from flower to flower. Oh yeah, bees, that's right. You've heard about that before. Bees are always hanging around flowers when the flowers are blooming. They're important, aren't they? What are they doing exactly? Something about pollinating the flowers, right? But what does that mean? You didn't have any bees in your greenhouse. It was all closed off. Could that have been why you didn't get any vanilla seed pods? What do you think? What exactly is it that bees are doing for flowers and plants? What do you know about pollination?
Why are bees important? What do you know about pollination?
When we talk about vanilla beans or seed pods, it's important to keep in mind what this part of the plant is. Inside of a seed pod are the plant's seeds, and the seeds of any plant are just like babies. They're plant babies. It sounds funny to say it that way. We don't often put the word plant and baby next to each other. But seeds really are plant babies. Once the seeds are planted, they'll grow up into adult plants. So again, your vanilla plants, they grew well and they grew flowers. But as you learned, the flowers are supposed to eventually shrivel up and become vanilla seed pods. That never happened. Watching the video of vanilla plants in the wild, you were reminded that bees are somehow important. In the wild, flowers bloom. Bees are attracted to them, and eventually the flowers turn into seed pods. It's almost as if the bees perform some kind of magic on the flower, and that turns the flower into seed pods. What is it that bees do? Well, notice how it's the center of a flower that the bee is interested in. It crawls down in there. That bee is in there for a few seconds, and then it comes back up and flies away. When a bee does this, it comes out all covered in this yellow powder. Do you see that? This yellow powder is what we call pollen. Notice that the reason the bees are getting covered in pollen is because as they climb down onto the center part of the flower has all these pollen dusters surrounding the center. You see the yellow pollen at the tops? The bees bump into those pollen dusters in order to get to where they're going. So the bees wind up getting really coated in pollen. There's a second part of the flower center to notice, and that's this thing right here in the middle, sticking up above the pollen dusters. It's this knob-like thing. Now, if you touch the end of this knob, you'll feel that it's sticky. It doesn't matter what kind of flower you have. If you look at the middle of any flower, there's always a knob-like thing that's poking above the pollen dusters, and it feels very sticky to the touch. Scientists call this sticky knob the stigma. It might be helpful for us to remember it as the sticky stigma. So as bees are flying in and out of a flower, not only are they getting covered in pollen from the pollen dusters, but they're occasionally bumping into the sticky stigma. And so some of that pollen gets stuck to the stigma. Scientists noticed all this and wondered if maybe that's the reason that flowers will drop their petals and then a seed pod will begin to form. Is there something important about pollen getting stuck to the sticky stigma? One scientist got curious and did an experiment in a greenhouse, taking some pollen from one flower and going around and dusting the sticky stigmas himself, instead of having bees do it. Sure enough, now the flowers dropped their petals and seed pods grew. So in order for seed pods to grow, there's an important process involved. The sticky stigma in the center of the flower needs to get pollen on it. This process of pollen needing to get on the sticky stigma in order for seeds to form, scientists named it pollination. Take a moment now. See if you can spot these two important flower parts, the pollen dusters and the sticky stigma, on some different kinds of flowers, like flowers you might find where you live.
Can you find the pollen dusters and the stigma in this flower? What do they look like? Can you find the pollen and dusters and stigma on this flower? What are they looking like? What about this flower? Where are the pollen dusters and stigma on this flower? Now that you know the stigma needs pollen on it in order for the seed pod to grow, what can you do in your greenhouse?
So after learning all this, you go ahead and try to pollinate your vanilla plant flowers yourself using a toothpick. You carefully take some of the pollen from the pollen dusters and move it over to the sticky stigma. As you're doing this, you think, this is a little crazy that plants can't do this by themselves. All they need is for some of the pollen from the pollen dusters to get onto the sticky stigma. It's so close. But whatever, if this is what it takes to make vanilla beans, if you have to do this with a toothpick, you gotta do it. So you do this. You wait a few weeks, and when you go back to check the plants, still nothing. The flowers still aren't turning into seed pods. It didn't work. What is going on here? Did you do something wrong? Didn't the scientists put pollen onto the sticky stigma and it worked? What's missing? Let's watch a video of bees landing on flowers again, but this time, watch a little more carefully. See if the bees are doing anything different from what you were doing.
Describe what you see going on here. Does this give you an idea for what you might need to do next?
So you know that a flower needs pollen on its sticky stigma in order for its seeds to develop. But when you moved pollen from a pollen duster to a stigma like this, it didn't work. Why not? Well, did you notice a clue in the video you watched? You already know that bees are interested in the center part of the flower. They're doing something in there. But did you notice anything else in this video? There was a clue, an important detail which you hadn't noticed earlier, right here. In this video of a bee, you could really notice the bee is flying from flower to flower to flower. It would land on one flower and crawl around toward the middle, do something, and then fly away to the next flower and repeat. This clue hadn't been obvious the first time. The pollen a plant needs on its stigma can't come from its own pollen dusters. Or in other words, a flower can't pollinate itself. It needs pollen from a different flower to create seeds. For example,
Hello. Yes, let me just pause my recording.